The dust devil that tore through the center of Victor, Montana, that scorching July afternoon in 1884 was nothing compared to the storm that had ripped through Nora Sawyer's life 3 months earlier when her sister died giving birth, leaving behind a screaming newborn girl and a husband who took one look at the baby and rode out of town without a backward glance. Nora stood in front of the general store now, bouncing little Emma against her shoulder while trying to figure out how she was going to pay for the flour, sugar, and coffee beans she desperately needed. Her teaching salary barely covered rent on the small house at the edge of town, and now she had a baby to feed, clothe, and raise as her own. The other women in Victor whispered behind their fans about her situation, about how improper it was for an unmarried woman of 23 to be raising a child alone, but Nora held her head high. Emma was blood family, and she would walk through fire before she let anyone take this baby from her. "That will be $4.30, Miss Sawyer," Mr. Henderson said from behind the counter, his tone sympathetic but firm. He had a business to run. Nora's heart sank as she counted the coins in her palm. $3.15. She had been so sure she had enough. "Could I possibly pay the remainder next week when I receive my salary?" Mr. Henderson shifted uncomfortably. "I am sorry, Miss Sawyer, but I have extended credit to too many folks already. Times are hard for everyone." The bell above the door chimed as someone entered the store. Nora did not turn around, too embarrassed by her predicament to meet anyone's eyes. Emma whimpered against her shoulder, and Nora adjusted the threadbare blanket wrapped around the infant. "Add whatever the lady needs to my account, Henderson." The voice was deep and unfamiliar, with a slight drawl that suggested time spent further south. Nora turned to find a tall man standing just inside the doorway, his hat in his hands. He had sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that needed a trim, and startling blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Dust covered his clothes, and he wore the unmistakable look of a man who spent most of his time in the saddle. "I cannot accept charity from a stranger," Nora said, straightening her spine. The cowboy stepped closer, and she noticed he moved with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. "Not charity, madam. Just helping out a neighbor. Name's Wade Lawson. Just bought the old Morrison ranch outside of town. Figure if we're going to be neighbors, might as well start off on friendly terms." "The Morrison place has been abandoned for 2 years," Mr. Henderson interjected. "You bought that property?" "Signed the papers this morning," Wade confirmed, his eyes never leaving Nora's face. "Place needs work, but the bones are good. Got water rights and decent grazing land." Emma chose that moment to let out a full-throated wail, and Nora bounced her more vigorously, making soothing sounds. "She is hungry," Nora said, feeling her cheeks heat with embarrassment. "And I still cannot accept your offer, Mr. Lawson. I will manage." Wade's expression softened as he looked at the baby. "Begging your pardon, madam, but that little one does not sound like she wants to wait for you to manage. Let me help. You can pay me back if it makes you feel better about it." The logic was sound, even if it pricked Nora's pride. Emma's needs had to come before her own stubborn independence. "Very well," she said quietly, "but I will repay every cent." "Whatever makes you comfortable," Wade said, then turned to Henderson. "Put it on my account." As Mr. Henderson wrapped up her purchases, Wade squatted down slightly to get a better look at Emma. The baby had stopped crying and was staring at him with wide, curious eyes. "She is a pretty little thing. How old?" 3 months, Nora replied, feeling some of her defensiveness ease at the genuine warmth in his voice. "Her name is Emma." "Emma," Wade repeated, reaching out to let the baby grasp his finger with her tiny hand. "That is a fine name. Strong." Something shifted in Nora's chest as she watched this stranger, this cowboy who had just ridden into town. show such gentleness with her niece? Most men in Victor either ignored Emma's existence or made it clear they thought Nora was a fool for taking on such a burden. "Here you are, Miss Sawyer," Mr. Henderson said, pushing the wrapped packages across the counter. Wade immediately picked them up before Nora could reach for them. "I will walk you home," Wade said. "These are heavy, and you have your hands full with the baby." "Mr. Lawson, you have already done too much." "It is just Wade, madam, and I insist. Besides, I need to learn my way around town." Nora found herself nodding, and together they stepped out into the blazing afternoon heat. Victor was not a large town, consisting of a single main street with various shops, a saloon, a church, the schoolhouse where Nora taught, and perhaps 40 or 50 homes scattered around the central area. Beyond that lay ranches and farms spreading out into the Montana wilderness, with the mountains visible in the distance. "You teach at the school?" Wade asked as they walked, matching his stride to her shorter one despite his limp. "Yes, I have been teaching here for 2 years. Before that, I taught in Helena, but I moved here when my sister married and settled in Victor." Nora's voice caught on the last words, the grief still fresh despite 3 months passing. Wade did not push for more information, seeming to sense the pain behind her words. Instead, he said, "I am sure you are a fine teacher. Town this size needs good educators." "You have children, Mr. Lawson?" The question left her lips before she could stop it, too personal for such a brief acquaintance. "No, madam, never married. Been moving around too much for that, working ranches from Texas up to here. Finally saved enough to buy my own place." He paused. "And please call me Wade. Mr. Lawson makes me feel like my father." They had reached Nora's small house, a modest structure with peeling paint and a porch that sagged slightly on one side. She felt self-conscious about its shabby appearance but held her head high as she climbed the steps. "You can set the packages inside." Wade followed her in, and Nora saw him take in the sparse furnishings, the mended curtains, the cradle she had constructed from an old crate, and some blankets. To his credit, his expression remained neutral as he set the packages on the small table. "Thank you for your help today," Nora said formally. "I will begin repaying you with my next salary." Wade settled his hat back on his head. "No rush. I know what it is like to be short on funds." He moved toward the door, then paused. "If you do not mind me asking, where is Emma's father?" Nora's jaw tightened. "Gone. He left the day she was born and has not returned. Emma's mother, my sister Charlotte, died in childbirth, so it is just the two of us now." Something dark flashed across Wade's face. "What kind of man abandons his own child? A coward," Nora said flatly. "But his loss is my gain. Emma is mine now in every way that matters." Wade nodded slowly. "She is lucky to have you." He tipped his hat. "I will be seeing you around town, Miss Sawyer, and if you need anything, anything at all, my ranch is about 5 miles north on the creek road. Morrison Creek, they call it." After he left, Nora sank into her rocking chair with Emma, who was fussing for her feeding. As she prepared the bottle with the precious milk she had managed to trade some mending work for, she found her thoughts returning to the cowboy with the kind eyes and gentle hands. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Nora taught her students during the day while the elderly Mrs. Patterson watched Emma for a small fee. In the evenings, she cared for the baby, mended clothes for extra money, and tried not to think about how exhausted she felt constantly. Emma was a good baby, but she still woke twice in the night for feeding, and Nora often found herself stumbling through her morning lessons in a fog of fatigue. She saw Wade around town occasionally. He nodded to her politely but kept his distance, which Nora told herself was for the best. She had no time for complications, no matter how appealing the cowboy might be. Then one Saturday morning, as Nora was hanging laundry in her small backyard with Emma napping in a basket nearby, she heard the sound of hammering. Confused, she walked around to the front of her house and stopped dead in her tracks. Wade was on her porch, a toolbox beside him, repairing the sagging boards. "What are you doing?" she called out. He looked up, wiping sweat from his brow. "Fixing your porch." Noticed it was dangerous the other day. Someone could fall through. Nora marched up to him, hands on her hips. "I did not hire you to do this." "Nope, you did not." He returned his attention to the board he was nailing down. "But it needs doing, and I have the time and skills." Consider it being neighborly. You cannot just show up and start making repairs without asking. Just did. He moved to the next board. "This whole section is rotted through. When was the last time anyone did maintenance on this place?" "The landlord is supposed to handle repairs," Nora said stiffly, "but he lives in Helena and rarely responds to requests. Then he is a fool and a poor businessman." Wade sat back on his heels and looked up at her. "Miss Sawyer, I mean no offense, but this is not safe. What if you were carrying Emma and stepped on a weak board? You could both get hurt." The logic was irrefutable, but accepting help still grated against Nora's fierce independence. "I cannot afford to pay you for this work." "Did not ask you to." Wade stood up, stretching his back. "Look, I know you are used to managing on your own, but there is no shame in accepting help when it is freely offered. You would do the same for someone else if positions were reversed, would you not?" Nora considered this. She would absolutely help a neighbor in need. "Yes," she admitted grudgingly. "Then let me do this. I have to ride into town anyway for supplies, and this is on my way. No sense in leaving a job half done." Before Nora could respond, Emma's cries came from the backyard. "I need to see to her. Go on. I will be done in an hour or so." Nora found herself obeying, though she felt strange leaving this man working on her house. She tended to Emma, changing and feeding her, and when she came back out, Wade was indeed finishing up the last board. "All done," he announced. "Should be solid now. Still could use a coat of paint when you get around to it." "Thank you," Nora said, meaning it. "I do appreciate this, even if I am terrible at showing it." Wade grinned, and the expression transformed his face from handsome to devastating. "You are welcome, and I understand. Pride is important. But so is practicality." Emma made a gurgling sound from Nora's arms, and Wade stepped closer. "May I?" he asked, holding out his hands. Nora hesitated only a moment before passing Emma to him. The baby looked impossibly small in Wade's large, calloused hands, but he held her with practiced ease, supporting her head carefully. "You are good with babies," Nora observed. "Lots of cousins back in Texas. Spent time with them growing up." Wade made a silly face at Emma, and the baby responded with what might have been a smile or might have been gas. "She is getting bigger, growing like a weed. I can barely keep her in clothes." Wade looked thoughtful as he handed Emma back. "I have been meaning to ask. Would you possibly be interested in some extra work? I need help getting the ranch house livable again. Cleaning, maybe some curtains, that sort of thing. I would pay fair wages." Nora's first instinct was to refuse, but practicality won out over pride this time. She desperately needed the money. "What exactly would you need done?" "Place has been empty 2 years and was not in great shape before that. Needs a thorough cleaning, windows washed, floors scrubbed. Eventually, I would like to make it feel like a home, not just a place to sleep. Maybe you could advise on that too." "I am not much for decorating." He looked almost embarrassed. "And you could bring Emma. I have plenty of space." "When would you want me to start?" "Whenever suits you. Sundays after church, maybe, or Saturday afternoons. Whatever works with your schedule." Nora considered. She did not teach on weekends, and Mrs. Patterson charged less for weekend watching. The extra money would be a godsend. Sunday afternoons would work. What are you paying? Wade named a figure that was more than generous, and Nora opened her mouth to argue that it was too much, but he cut her off. That is the going rate, maybe even a bit low for the amount of work involved. Take it or leave it. I will take it, Nora said quickly. When should I start? Tomorrow. I will pick you up after church services. We can have lunch at the ranch and you can look over what needs doing. That was how Nora found herself sitting beside Wade in his wagon the next afternoon, with Emma in her arms, heading out to Morrison Creek Ranch. The countryside was beautiful, rolling grassland dotted with cattle, with the mountains providing a dramatic backdrop. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwood trees that provided welcome shade. The ranch house itself was larger than Nora had expected, a two-story structure that had good bones but clearly needed attention. The yard was overgrown, several shutters hung at odd angles, and the whole place had an air of abandonment. Inside was not much better. Dust covered every surface, the windows were grimy, and evidence of mice was everywhere. But the structure was sound, the rooms were spacious, and Nora could see the potential. It is a disaster, Wade said apologetically. I have been sleeping in the bunkhouse and focusing on getting the barn and fences sorted out first. The animals needed shelter more than I needed comfort. It will clean up, Nora assured him, already making mental lists. It needs work, but nothing that cannot be fixed with elbow grease and time. Wade had set up a makeshift nursery in the parlor, a blanket spread on the floor with pillows arranged to keep Emma contained. The baby seemed fascinated by the new environment, looking around with wide eyes. They ate a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and cold chicken that Wade had prepared, and then Nora got to work. She started with the kitchen, the heart of any home, scrubbing surfaces and washing windows while Wade worked outside on repairs. Emma napped peacefully in her makeshift play area, and Nora found herself humming as she worked. This became their routine. Every Sunday after church, Wade would collect Nora and Emma. They would spend the afternoon at the ranch, and slowly the house began to transform. Wade proved to be an excellent carpenter, fixing shutters, repairing floorboards, and even building a proper cradle for Emma that he shyly presented to Nora one afternoon. "You made this?" Nora asked, running her hands over the smooth wood. "Had some scrap lumber." "Thought Emma might like something better than that crate you have been using." Wade looked uncertain. "If you do not like it, I can modify it." "It is beautiful," Nora said softly. "Thank you, truly." As the weeks turned into months, Nora found herself looking forward to Sundays with an eagerness that had nothing to do with the wages Wade paid her. She enjoyed his company, his quiet humor, the way he always had fresh coffee ready when she arrived, how he played with Emma and made the baby laugh. Wade started joining Nora and Emma for dinner after their work sessions, staying later and later until full darkness fell before he reluctantly drove them home. They talked about everything during those long evenings: his childhood in Texas, her years teaching, their hopes and dreams, their fears and failures. One evening in late September, as the air began to carry autumn's chill, Wade built a fire in the parlor fireplace. Emma was asleep in her cradle, and Nora was sitting in the rocking chair Wade had repaired, a cup of tea warming her hands. The house had been transformed over the past months. The windows gleamed, the floors shone, and Nora had even made curtains from fabric Wade had purchased in town. "Place feels like a home now," Wade said, looking around with satisfaction. "You have done wonders with it." "We both have," Nora corrected. "I just cleaned. You did all the real work. Do not sell yourself short. There is a difference between a clean house and a home. You made this a home." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. I have been thinking. This place is too big for one person. Seems like a waste. Nora's heart began to beat faster, but she kept her voice steady. Are you thinking of hiring a housekeeper? Not exactly. Wade left his position by the fireplace and came to sit on the footstool near her chair. Miss Sawyer. Nora, these past months getting to know you and Emma have been the happiest of my life. I look forward to Sundays all week. And lately, I have been dreading Sunday evenings when I have to take you home. Wade, Nora whispered, her tea forgotten. Let me finish before I lose my nerve. He took a deep breath. I know this is not how things are usually done. I should probably court you properly for a year, ask your father for permission, all of that. But you do not have family here to ask, and life is uncertain. I learned that the hard way during the war. You were in the war. Nora had not known this, just the tail end. I was young, barely old enough to enlist, saw enough to know that tomorrow is not guaranteed. So I am just going to say this straight out. I have fallen in love with you, Nora. I love your strength, your stubbornness, your fierce devotion to Emma. I love how you hum when you think no one is listening and how you get this little crease between your eyebrows when you are concentrating. I love everything about you. Nora's eyes filled with tears. Wade, I do not know what to say. Say you will marry me. You and Emma both. I know she is not mine by blood, but I will love her as my own. She will have a father, a real one who will never abandon her. And you will have a partner, someone to share the burdens and the joys. He reached out and took her free hand. I will never be rich, but I am a hard worker. I will provide for you both, protect you both, love you both for the rest of my life. Say yes, Nora, please. The tears spilled over, running down Nora's cheeks. I am crying, she said stupidly. I can see that. Are they happy tears or sad tears? Because if they are sad tears, I will leave you alone. I will not press. Happy tears, you fool. Nora set down her tea and threw her arms around his neck. Yes, yes, I will marry you. I love you too, Wade. I have for weeks now, but I was afraid to hope, afraid to believe this could be real. Wade's arms came around her, holding her tight. It is real. I promise you, this is real. They sat there for a long moment, just holding each other, until Emma made a small sound from her cradle. Wade pulled back and looked over at the baby with such tenderness that Nora felt her heart might burst. Did you hear that, Emma girl? Wade said softly. Your Aunt Nora and I are getting married. That means you get a father now, a real father who is going to love you something fierce. Emma, of course, could not understand the words, but she waved her tiny fists and made happy cooing sounds as if she approved. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the small church in Victor. Nora wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her make, and she carried wildflowers that Wade had picked that morning. Emma, now nearly 6 months old and able to sit up with support, was held by Mrs. Patterson during the ceremony, gurgling and babbling throughout the vows as if adding her own blessing. The whole town turned out, curiosity drawing those who had gossiped about Nora's situation. But when they saw the way Wade looked at Nora, the way he held Emma after the ceremony as if she were precious beyond measure, the whispers turned from critical to approving. At the reception held in the church hall, Wade stood and made a short speech. I want everyone here to know that I am not just gaining a wife today. I am gaining a daughter. Emma is my child now in every way that matters. Her Aunt Nora has raised her with such love and devotion, and I consider it an honor and privilege to take on the role of father. From this day forward, Emma will want for nothing. She will know she is loved, wanted, and cherished. That is my solemn vow. There was not a dry eye in the room when he finished. Nora and Emma moved to Morrison Creek Ranch the next day. Wade had spent the previous week making sure everything was perfect. He had painted Emma's room a cheerful yellow, and installed the cradle he had built with such care. He had stocked the kitchen with supplies and picked more wildflowers to brighten every room. That first night, after Emma was settled in her new room, Wade and Nora sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Wade had his arm around Nora's shoulders, and she leaned into his solid warmth. "Are you happy?" Wade asked quietly. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Nora replied honestly. "3 months ago, I was alone, struggling, terrified of how I was going to manage. Now I have a home, a husband, and Emma has a father. It feels like a dream, not a dream. Just life finally working out the way it should." Wade pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for seeing past the difficulties and loving us anyway." "There was no anyway about it. I loved you because of who you are, not in spite of it. Your strength, your determination to do right by Emma, that is what drew me to you in the first place." The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. The ranch required constant work, money was sometimes tight, and Emma was a demanding baby who did not always sleep through the night. But they faced each challenge together, and somehow that made everything easier. Wade proved to be the father he had promised to be. He got up with Emma in the night when Nora was exhausted, walking the floor with the fussy baby and singing off key lullabies that somehow always worked. He played with her endlessly, built her toys, and talked to her constantly even though she was too young to talk back. When Emma took her first steps at 11 months old, tottering from Wade to Nora and back again while they both cheered, Wade had tears in his eyes. "Did you see that? Our girl walked. She actually walked." "Our girl," Nora echoed, loving the way that sounded. By Emma's first birthday, she was calling Wade Papa in her baby babble, and the joy on his face every time she said it never diminished. He threw her an elaborate birthday party, inviting families from neighboring ranches and town, complete with a cake Nora had made and decorations Wade had stayed up late creating. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Nora continued teaching during the school year while Wade worked the ranch. Mrs. Patterson, who had become like a grandmother to Emma, watched the baby during school hours. In the evenings, they were a family eating dinner together, playing with Emma, working on small projects around the house. Wade expanded the ranch steadily, buying more cattle, improving the property, building their future. Nora contributed by selling eggs and butter in town, her own little business that gave her independence and pride. Together, they were building something lasting. In the spring, when Emma was nearly 2 years old, Nora realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Wade, nervous about how he would react. Would he love this child more because it was his by blood? Would Emma be pushed aside? She told him one evening after Emma was in bed. Wade was sitting at the kitchen table, going over account books, and Nora stood in the doorway watching him for a moment before gathering her courage. "Wade, I need to tell you something." He looked up immediately, hearing the serious tone in her voice. "What is wrong? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine." She moved to sit beside him. "I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." Wade stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, and Nora felt panic rise in her chest. Then suddenly he was on his feet, pulling her up and into his arms, spinning her around despite her protests. "We are having a baby," he shouted. "A baby, Nora." Wade put me down. "You will make me dizzy." He set her down but kept his hands on her waist, his face split by the biggest grin she had ever seen. "This is amazing. Wonderful. How are you feeling? Do you need anything? Should you be sitting down?" "I am fine. It is early still, probably only 6 or 7 weeks." Wade immediately pulled out a chair. "Sit. Rest. Let me get you water. Are you hungry?" "Do you need anything?" Nora laughed, loving his enthusiasm but needing to address her concern. "Wade, you know this does not change anything with Emma, right? She is still your daughter." Wade's expression sobered immediately. "Of course she is. Nora, nothing will ever change that. Emma is my daughter in every way that matters. I do not love her any less because we did not share blood. If anything, I love her more because I chose her. I chose to be her father. This new baby will be Emma's brother or sister, and they will both be loved equally. You have to believe that." "I do," Nora said, and she meant it. "I just had to hear you say it." "I will say it as many times as you need to hear it. Emma is mine. This baby is mine. You are mine. We are a family, bound by love, not just blood. That is what makes us strong." Emma was excited about the prospect of a baby sibling. Though at not quite 2 years old, she did not fully understand what it meant. She liked to pat Nora's growing belly and babble to the baby, making everyone laugh. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Nora continued teaching through the early months, then took a leave as her belly grew too large to hide. Wade became even more protective, constantly worrying about her health, making sure she rested, bringing her little treats from town. On a cold November night, with snow falling outside and Emma sleeping in her room, Nora went into labor. Wade rode through the storm to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Patterson, and the doctor, returning with all three in record time. The labor was long and difficult, and Wade paced outside the bedroom door while Mrs. Patterson sat with Emma, who had woken and was fretful from all the commotion. When the baby's first cries finally rang out, Wade burst into the room despite the doctor's protests. "Nora, is she all right? Is the baby all right?" "Everyone is fine," the midwife assured him. "You have a son." "A son." Wade approached the bed where Nora lay exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle. "Meet your son," she said softly. Wade took the baby with shaking hands, looking down at the red, wrinkled face with absolute wonder. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Nora. Thank you for this gift." They named him William James Lawson, after Wade's father and Nora's father respectively. Emma was brought in to meet her baby brother, and she stared at him with wide eyes before declaring him tiny and wanting to go back to bed. Wade laughed through his tears. "That is our Emma, practical as always." William, or Billy as he quickly became known, was a fussy baby who cried more than Emma ever had. Many nights, Wade walked the floor with the screaming infant while Nora caught what sleep she could between feedings. Emma, now a toddler of 2.5, was surprisingly patient with her noisy brother, often bringing him her favorite toys in an attempt to make him stop crying. Wade never wavered in his devotion to either child. He split his attention equally, making sure Emma never felt neglected despite the demands of a newborn. He still had special time with her every evening, reading stories and playing their games, while Nora nursed Billy. "You are an amazing father," Nora told him one night as she watched him with Emma on his lap and Billy sleeping against his shoulder. "Both children are so lucky to have you." "I am the lucky one," Wade insisted. "I never thought I would have this. A family, a home, children. I thought I would always be a drifter, moving from ranch to ranch. Then I met you and Emma, and suddenly I had a reason to put down roots. You three are my whole world." As the children grew, the ranch prospered. Wade hired a couple of ranch hands to help with the work, allowing him more time with the family. Nora eventually returned to teaching part-time, loving her work but always making sure she was home when the children needed her. Emma grew into a bright, confident little girl who loved horses and had her father wrapped around her little finger. She looked like Charlotte, Nora's sister, with the same dark hair and green eyes, but her personality was all her own. Strong-willed and independent, She reminded Nora of herself. Billy was quieter, more thoughtful, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's tendency to worry. He adored his big sister and followed her everywhere, much to Emma's mixed delight and annoyance. When Emma was 5 and Billy was 3, Emma came home from school one day in tears. Wade scooped her up immediately, holding her close. "What happened, sweetheart? Why are you crying?" "Tommy Martin said you are not my real papa," Emma sobbed. "He said my real papa left because he did not want me." Wade's face darkened with anger, but his voice remained gentle. "Emma, look at me." He waited until her tear-filled eyes met his. "Tommy Martin is wrong. I am your real papa. Maybe I did not help bring you into this world, but I have been your papa since you were just a tiny baby. I chose you, Emma. I chose to love you and raise you and be your father. That makes me just as real as any papa could be." But he said blood is what makes family. Blood is one way to make family, but it is not the only way. Love makes family. Choice makes family. Every day I wake up and choose to be your papa, and that will never change. Do you understand? Emma nodded slowly. "I am glad you are my papa. You are the best papa in the whole world." Wade hugged her tighter. "And you are the best daughter. Never let anyone make you feel like you are less loved or less wanted. You are my first child, my daughter, and nothing will ever change that." Later that night, after the children were asleep, Wade told Nora what had happened. "Maybe we should have told her before now," he said. "About her biological father, about Charlotte. She is old enough to have questions." "You are right," Nora agreed. "We need to tell her the truth before someone else does. But we need to make sure she understands that it does not change who her family is." The next Sunday, they took Emma for a walk, just the three of them, while Mrs. Patterson watched Billy. They sat by Morrison Creek, the water bubbling over rocks, and told Emma the story of her birth mother, of the father who had left, of how Nora had taken her in, and how Wade had chosen to be her father. Emma listened quietly, her young face serious. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "So Aunt Nora is really my mama, but she was my mama's sister first." "That is right," Nora confirmed. "And my first papa left, but then Papa Wade came and decided to be my papa instead." "Yes," Wade said. Emma considered this. "I think my first papa was stupid. If he had stayed, he could have had the best family. But since he left, Papa Wade got to be my papa instead, and that worked out better." Wade laughed, relieved. "I think so too, sweetheart. Can I still call you Mama and Papa, even though I know the truth?" "Of course," Nora said quickly. "We are your Mama and Papa. That never changes. Okay, can we go home now? I want to play with Billy." Just like that, the matter was settled in Emma's mind. She never brought it up again, confident in her place in the family and the love of her parents. The years passed in a blur of busy, happy days. The ranch continued to grow, becoming one of the more successful operations in the area. Wade took on more land, built a bigger barn, and employed several full-time ranch hands. Nora's teaching reputation grew, and students came from surrounding areas to attend her classes. Emma and Billy were thick as thieves despite their different personalities. They fought like cats and dogs one moment and were inseparable the next. Emma taught Billy to ride when he was barely old enough to sit a horse, and Billy taught Emma to read before she started school, having learned from listening to his mother teach. When Emma was 10 and Billy was 8, Nora found herself pregnant again, much to everyone's surprise. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, and she was often sick and exhausted. Wade insisted she stop teaching immediately and rest. Emma stepped up to help around the house, showing a maturity beyond her years. Billy did his best to be quiet and helpful, though his idea of helping sometimes created more work. Wade managed the ranch while also taking over most of the household chores, and somehow they all muddled through. On a warm June evening, Nora gave birth to twin girls, identical and tiny. They named them Sarah Catherine and Grace Elizabeth, and suddenly the house was full to bursting with children and chaos. Emma was thrilled with her baby sisters, taking on the role of big sister with enthusiasm. Billy was less certain about two more babies after having gotten used to being the youngest, but he warmed up quickly when he realized they thought he was fascinating. Wade looked at his family, at Nora exhausted but glowing as she nursed the twins, at Emma holding Sarah with practiced ease, at Billy making Grace laugh, and felt his heart might explode with love and gratitude. "We are quite the family now," Nora said, catching his expression. "We certainly are," Wade agreed. "5 children. When I bought this ranch and rode into Victor that day, if someone had told me this would be my life, I never would have believed them. Do you regret it? The chaos, the noise, the expense? Not for a single second. This is everything I never knew I wanted. You are everything I never knew I needed." The twins were a handful, as twins often are. They were identical in appearance but opposites in personality. Sarah was calm and observant while Grace was active and loud. They kept everyone on their toes. As they grew, the family dynamic shifted again. Emma became a second mother to the twins, helping with their care and teaching them everything she knew. Billy found his role as the protector, watching out for his little sisters and making sure no one teased them. When Emma was 14, a young man came calling and Wade nearly lost his mind. Nora had to talk him down from chasing the poor boy away with a shotgun. "She is too young," Wade protested. "She is the same age I was when I started teaching," Nora pointed out. "And he is just coming to visit, chaperoned by us. Nothing inappropriate is happening. I do not care. She is my little girl." Emma overheard this conversation and came into the kitchen where her parents were talking. "Papa, I am not going to run off and get married. Johnny Miller is just a friend. We are studying together." "Studying," Wade muttered suspiciously. "Yes, studying. You know, books and learning." Emma rolled her eyes in the way only a teenage girl could. "Besides, even if I did want to court someone, which I do not, I would never choose someone who was not at least half as good as you. You set the standard pretty high for what a man should be." Wade's expression softened. "I just want you to be careful and happy and safe." "I know, and I am. But you have to let me grow up sometime." "No, I do not. I can keep you little forever if I want." Emma hugged him. "You will always be my papa no matter how old I get. That never changes." It was the same thing Wade had told her years ago when she was 5 and crying over Tommy Martin's cruel words. Now she was saying it back to him, and Wade felt the weight of time passing, his children growing up, the inevitable march toward the future. Billy grew tall and strong, taking after Wade in build and temperament. He loved the ranch and spent every free moment learning from his father. By the time he was 16, he was doing the work of a full-grown man, and Wade relied on him heavily. The twins were 10 now, still identical but very different. Sarah wanted to be a teacher like her mother, spending hours with books and helping with the younger children in town. Grace wanted to be a rancher like her father, preferring horses and cattle to books and lessons. One evening, with all the children finally in bed, Wade and Nora sat on their porch as they had done countless times over the years. They were older now, graying at the temples, lines around their eyes from years of laughter and sun. But the love between them had only grown stronger with time. "Do you remember that first day we met?" Wade asked. "You were in Henderson's store trying to figure out how to pay for supplies, and Emma was crying. I remember thinking you were the most presumptuous man I had ever met," Nora said with a smile. offering to pay for a stranger's purchases. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and that baby in your arms needed someone to look after both of you. We did not need looking after. We were managing fine. Wade snorted. You were managing, barely. And you were exhausted and scared and doing it all alone. I could see that even then. Well, I am glad you were presumptuous. If you had not been, I might have been too stubborn to accept help and we might never have become friends. And then more than friends, Wade added, taking her hand. Best decision I ever made, riding into Victor that day. Second best, Nora corrected. The best decision was proposing to me. Fair point. Wade lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for these years, these children, this life. Thank you for Emma and Billy and the twins. Thank you for making me a father and a husband. Thank you for everything. Nora leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you for seeing past my pride and stubbornness. Thank you for loving Emma as your own from the very beginning. Thank you for being the man who stayed when another man ran away. Thank you for being the father Emma needed, the husband I needed, the man this family needed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out over the Montana wilderness, the sounds of their ranch settling down for the night around them. Inside the house, their children slept safely, loved and cherished and secure in the knowledge that they were wanted. Emma, nearly 15 now, dreamed of her future, whatever it might hold. Billy, 13, dreamed of the day he would run the ranch alongside his father. Sarah and Grace, 10 years old, dreamed their separate dreams, one of classrooms and books, the other of horses and open ranges. And in the master bedroom, in the cradle that Wade had built so many years ago for Emma, their newest addition slept peacefully. Little Charlotte Rose, named for Nora's sister and born just 3 months earlier, was a surprise and a blessing, bringing the family total to 6 children. Wade had been shocked when Nora told him about this pregnancy. Another one, really? Are you unhappy? Nora had asked nervously. Unhappy? No. Surprised, but not unhappy, though we are going to need to build an addition to the house at this rate. He had built that addition, and Charlotte now had a beautiful nursery that looked out over the ranch her father had built through years of hard work and determination. Time continued its march forward. Emma grew up and did eventually marry, though not until she was 22, and had spent several years teaching alongside her mother. She married a good man from a neighboring ranch, someone Wade thoroughly vetted and eventually approved of, and they had children of their own. Billy took over much of the ranch operations as Wade grew older, though Wade never fully retired. He loved the work too much to stop completely. Billy married at 25, bringing home a spirited young woman who won everyone's hearts immediately, and they built a house on the ranch property, starting their own family while remaining close. The twins went their separate ways. Sarah became a teacher, just as she had always dreamed, eventually moving to Helena to teach at a larger school. Grace stayed on the ranch, working alongside Billy and eventually marrying one of the ranch hands. Together, they expanded the cattle operation even further. Charlotte, the baby, grew up in a house full of love and siblings who doted on her. She was the bridge between generations, young enough to have nieces and nephews not much younger than herself, but still very much Wade and Nora's baby girl. As Wade grew older, he made sure Emma knew how much she meant to him. One evening, when she was visiting with her own children, he pulled her aside. "Emma, I want you to know something," he said seriously. "You were my first child. You made me a father. Before you, I was just a man working a ranch. After you, I had a purpose, a reason to build something lasting. You gave that to me. I will never be able to thank you enough for letting me be your papa." Emma, now a grown woman with children of her own, had tears in her eyes. "Papa, you saved me. You and Mama both. I could have ended up in an orphanage or with people who did not want me. Instead, I got the best parents in the world. I got a family. I got brothers and sisters. I got everything because you chose me. So thank you. Thank you for choosing me." They hugged, and Wade felt the circle completing itself. The crying baby in the general store had become this strong, confident woman. The scared young aunt who had taken on a responsibility too big for one person had become his beloved wife. The struggling cowboy who had bought a run-down ranch had become the patriarch of a thriving family. When Wade was 72 and Nora was 70, they sat on that same porch where they had sat so many times before. Their children and grandchildren had come for Sunday dinner, a tradition that had continued for decades. The house was full of noise and laughter, children running everywhere, adults catching up on news and gossip. Emma sat down beside them, moving slower now with her own grandchild on her hip. "Thank you for dinner, Mama. It was wonderful as always." "You are welcome, dear. Though your sisters did most of the cooking this time, I just supervised." Emma laughed. "That is what grandmothers do, supervise and offer wisdom." Wade looked at his daughter, his first child, the baby who had changed everything. She was 67 now, with gray hair and grandchildren of her own, but he still saw that tiny infant who had grabbed his finger in Henderson's general store. "I love you, Emma girl," he said softly. "I love you too, Papa. Always have, always will." As the sun set over Morrison Creek Ranch that evening, as it had set thousands of times before over the past decades, Wade reflected on his life. He had started with nothing but determination and a willingness to work hard. He had ended with everything that mattered: a wife he adored, children and grandchildren who loved him, a successful ranch, and a lifetime of memories. He thought about that day in Victor when he had walked into Henderson's store and seen a young woman struggling, a baby crying, and pride warring with desperation on her face. He had acted on instinct, offering help to a stranger. That simple act of kindness had led to everything else: love, marriage, family, purpose. "What are you thinking about?" Nora asked, noticing his reflective expression. "About how lucky I am. About how one small decision, one moment of choosing to help someone changed my entire life." "It changed mine too," Nora said. "That day, I was at my lowest point. I had no idea how I was going to manage. Then you walked in and just started helping without asking for anything in return. You gave me hope when I had none left." "We gave each other hope," Wade corrected. "And we built something beautiful together. Look at them all." He gestured toward the house, toward the sounds of family and love and life. "We did that. You and me together, we built this family." "The best kind of family," Nora agreed. "The kind built on love and choice, not just obligation or blood." Inside the house, Emma was telling her own grandchildren the story of how her papa had chosen her, how he had looked at a baby that was not his by blood and decided to love her anyway. The children listened with rapt attention, just as Emma's own children had listened, just as Emma herself had listened all those years ago. The story was passed down through the generations, a tale of love and choice and the man who had looked at a struggling woman and a crying baby and said, "Now she has a father too." It became the foundation of the family's identity, the proof that love was stronger than blood, that family was what you made it, that choosing to love someone was just as valid as being born into love. Wade and Nora lived to see their great-grandchildren, lived to see the ranch passed down to the next generation, lived to see the family they had built continue to grow and thrive. They had their challenges, as all families do. There were deaths and illnesses, financial struggles and personal conflicts. But through it all, the foundation they had built held strong. When Wade finally passed away at the age of 85, surrounded by family who loved him, his last words were to Emma. "Still my first child," he whispered. "Still my girl." "Always, Papa," Emma replied, holding his weathered hand. "Always your girl." Nora followed him 3 years later, having lived a full life surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She died peacefully in her sleep, in the house Wade had restored for her, on the ranch that had been their home for more than 60 years. The family gathered for her funeral, spanning 4 generations. Emma, now 90 years old and matriarch of the family, stood at her mother's grave and told stories of how Nora had taken in a baby that was not hers, how she had fought to keep Emma when others said she should give her up, how she had raised her with fierce love and stubborn determination. "My mother taught me that family is not just about blood," Emma said, her voice still strong despite her age. "She taught me that love is a choice we make every day, and she showed me that the strongest families are built on that foundation of chosen love. My father understood that too. Together, they built something that will last long after we are all gone." And it did last. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through the generations. The story of Wade and Nora, of the cowboy who chose to love a child not his own, of the woman who raised her niece as a daughter, became family legend. It was told and retold, each generation adding their own flourishes but keeping the heart of the story intact. On Morrison Creek Ranch, in a place of honor in the main house, hung a photograph. It showed a young couple with a baby. Wade stood tall and proud, one arm around Nora, the other holding little Emma. They were smiling at the camera, but their eyes were on each other and the baby, full of love and hope for the future. Below the photograph, a brass plaque bore an inscription: "Wade and Nora Lawson with daughter Emma, 1884. Family is love, and love is choice." It was a simple statement, but it captured everything about their life together. Wade had walked into Henderson's general store that hot July day in 1884 and had made a choice. He had chosen to help a stranger. That choice had led to other choices: to court Nora, to marry her, to adopt Emma as his own, to build a family based on love rather than obligation. And those choices had led to everything else: more children, a thriving ranch, decades of happiness, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. All because one man had looked at a woman struggling with a baby and had decided to help. All because one woman had been brave enough to accept that help and open her heart to love. All because they had both believed that family was what you made it, not what you were born into. The sun set over Morrison Creek Ranch as it had done for more than a century, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. The cattle grazed peacefully in the fields. The house, expanded and updated but still recognizable, stood solid and strong. And inside, the latest generation of Lawsons gathered for Sunday dinner, carrying on a tradition that had started so long ago. They told the stories again, as they always did. About Wade walking into Henderson's store, about Nora's fierce independence and stubborn pride, about little Emma and the cradle Wade had built, about the proposal by the fireplace and the wedding in the church, about Billy and the twins and Charlotte, about a life built on love and choice and unwavering commitment. And as the stories were told, as they had been told countless times before, the spirit of Wade and Nora lived on, in the laughter of children, in the love of family, in the understanding that sometimes the greatest families are not the ones we are born into, but the ones we choose to create. In Victor, Montana, where it all began, the small church still stood. The general store was long gone, replaced by modern buildings, but the essence of the town remained. And in the cemetery on the hill, Two headstones stood side by side, bearing simple inscriptions. Wade Lawson, 1856–1941. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, he chose love. Nora Sawyer Lawson, 1861–1944. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she chose courage, and between them a smaller stone placed there by Emma herself before she died. It reads simply, Emma Lawson Miller, 1884–1975. First daughter, forever loved. She was chosen. The legacy they built together continued, generation after generation, proof that love is indeed a choice, and the best families are built on that foundation of chosen, intentional love. The cowboy had walked into a store, seen a woman struggling, and had said, "Now she has a father too." And in saying those words, in making that choice, he had built something that would last forever.